Exciting news! Australia now has a national organic mark. Today I'm interviewing Adam Willson, the chairman of the Organic Federation of Australia. I start by asking Adam about the word organic. What does it mean, and what does it mean to be certified organic?
Okay, so if we stick critically to the word organic basically means anything with carbon in it. So it's all life forms. But in the last 20 years, it's pertained more to a clean way of producing food. Now that sort of separates itself a lot from certified organic, whereby there is a strict third-party accreditation process, and they follow national rules of each country. Australian national organic standards is the rules that we follow, and there's limited inputs that you're allowed to put into your farm, and there's certain things that you have to do. So, for instance, there's no artificial nitrogen fertilisers, no fungicides, pesticides of any sort.
What's the difference between organic and biodynamic?
Biodynamic's a different kettle of fish. Both are clean ways of producing food, but biodynamic has always had a foundation in primarily having high humus content in the soil, and the other one is that they try to have a relatively closed system. So they're trying to minimise inputs onto the farm. They're not completely excluding all inputs, but what they're trying to do is minimise any risk. And then, of course, what the other key thing about biodynamics is that they try to work within the rhythms, the natural rhythms of the earth. So that means things like the lunar cycle, when do you plant, all those type of things. They have a very close association with livestock. And I've been to a couple of biodynamic farms, and there's one in Überlingen in Germany that's an absolute standout farm. And they tend to be pushing more towards integrated farming practices. So they have both livestock and crops or vegetables together. And it's an incredible experience to go to a really good biodynamic farm like Überlingen. That's up near Lake Constance in Germany. And they had medical facilities there. They had a school facility there. It's tied in with the Waldorf school system. So they're very natural, they're very about linking to the earth, and they've got a particular way of doing things, whereas the organics tend to be just strictly following rules, and there's no deep philosophy that drives the organic system at the current point in time, which when it was formed, the organic industry, it was formed around three principles, and that was recycling of organic matter, obviously remineralisation, and the third one is biodiversity, and all those things are fundamental principles of organic farming and biodynamic farming, but it's really only the biodynamic people that have really enforced them.
Can anyone label their product organic?
That's an interesting question. Under the current Australian domestic laws, yes, you can. You can call anything organic. But you can't call something certified organic. If you call it certified organic, obviously you are then going to be prosecuted for it. There is a push by the federal government, and it will come in at some point in time and we're encouraging that push to go across to Standards Australia. So when currently our national standards it was set up 25 years ago to push exports. Now, when we're talking about the Standards Australia, what's going to happen there is it's going to be governed by ACCC. So we have a standard that's exactly the same as our national organic standards. It's called AS 6000. And when the government decides to go down the route of pushing it into Standards Australia, then we will have a standard that will slip in nicely there. Now, the important thing of this is that once we have AS 6000 in place, we can then go back to the state governments and say, look, we need to do something very important. We need to legislate the word organic, and that's what we'll be lobbying for. That will be one of the things on our list to do once AS 6000 is implemented.
What's the rough time frame?
Oh, it'll be in the next 6 to 12 months, I'd say. I mean, we're really surprised at how fast. We've got a great team in the Organic Federation of Australia, and we've worked tirelessly the last 2 years to get the national mark off the ground. And I would say that the government will make a decision in the next 6 to 12 months.
Can you tell us a little bit about the National Organic Mark? What is it and what does it mean for Australian consumers?
Okay. Look, it's been on the drawing board for nearly 12 years, and it's now just come through in the last couple of weeks. It's basically a mark that goes alongside the certification logo, and it's used to export your product overseas. Now, at the moment, if you're exporting product into, say, the US or into Asia, because we don't have a national mark and there are guidelines by those countries in order how stuff should be brought in, we often have to have another layer of certification, which is the US NOP system, or if it's going to Chinese, it'll get a Chinese certification. Now, when we get equivalency, once you have a national mark, then you can have a chat with the other country. The governments of each country talk to each other, and they get equivalency. And that means that they agree with your organic standards and we agree with their organic standards. And most of the time, there's hardly any difference between the standards. So once there's an agreement, then there's an equivalency. Once there's equivalency, then the beautiful thing about that is we use the mark for trading, and there's no longer the need for those growers or those processors to have two types of certification costs. There'll only be the requirement of the national certification cost. So in the future, we have three that are in the pipeline. We've got South Korea, we've got China, and we've got US equivalencies underway at the moment. Once they're through, that'll speed up the trading between countries, and obviously the costs to the processors and to the producers will drop. Now, from a consumer point of view, it's even more exciting because over time, as every consumer can understand, or listeners to your program will understand, every time you do packaging, it costs a lot of money to print. So when you do a reprint, you want to make sure that everything is on there that will help your business. So as the national mark goes into the new printing programs of each company, what's going to happen is the consumers, instead of in the past having to look around for one of 6 certifying logos, actually will be looking around for one logo, and that'll be the national mark. And it will be alongside the certifier's logo. So you'll immediately see, yes, this is certified.
What's the likely impact on the organic industry?
In the US, when the national mark, or what they call the national seal, was introduced in 2002, it was a 13.4% growth from 2002 to 2015, which is extraordinary growth.
When is it available and who can apply?
Yeah, it's available. Currently, processors and producers, all they have to do is talk to their certifier, and then there's a license agreement between the certifier and that producer or processor. There's no cost for the use of the mark. It's just an additional license agreement.
How did the National Organic Mark come about?
That was put together by both the OISC is the industry body, certification standards body, and they put in the application for the national mark, and the OFA, the Organic Federation of Australia, has been supporting them in that endeavour. So it's been good.
What were your key learnings from your 1-year sabbatical?
Well, what an experience that was. To be honest, it was something that my wife and I thought through quite carefully. We'd been working on our market garden here for 3 years, a bit over 3 years, and then we decided, well, look, how about we just do a bit more learning and travel and have a look at other organic farms, other peak bodies. And so we headed off to both Europe and Southeast Asia to get some perspective on how to improve our market garden, how to improve our business, and just to talk with other peak bodies about, how they managing and growing their business constituents. So we started off in Holland. We flew into Holland, and that's really the home of horticulture, and the organic industry there are incredibly advanced. And the thing we really noticed from a consumer's perspective, there was almost in every town there was an organic shop that was really well, because they use the EU logo. Their national mark is easy to recognise. It's easy as a consumer to buy food. A lot of emphasis on local food production. A lot of emphasis on good labelling, and lots of activities around organic farming, organic social networking, communities, that sort of stuff. And I think that's one of the key things that differentiates conventional from organic farming, is that there's a sense of community with organic farming. That's one of the big social underpinnings of organics, is that no matter where you are in the world, if you're an organic farmer, organic processor, or even an organic consumer, you feel part of a group, and it's quite a caring group. And so that's what we found. We obviously visited lots of museums while we were there, which was quite inspirational. But we went on from Holland and we went into Denmark. Denmark was extraordinary. There would have been in Copenhagen about 15% of the food being organic. So many retail outlets, corner stores, restaurants all had organic food. It was one of their big directives, is to push for organic production. We even visited an organic home delivery business that was delivering 40,000 boxes a day. And that was just the logistics of that alone just makes your head shake. And it's driven by young people, 24 to 35s. They're all educated. Most of them are females that are driving this whole industry. They've made a decision. They don't want, all those endocrine disruptors. They don't want all those neurotoxins in their system. They want a clean lifestyle for their family. And they're putting their money, they're prioritising their money into this future. And Denmark also has a beautiful way of, they know how to design things really well. And so it's very, very appealing to the eye. Everything you see in the organics sector was really quite appealing. Food was great. And so we just rented an apartment and then we bought local produce and cooked at home and that sort of stuff. So it was very, very nice time there. Then we went into Sweden. Sweden also was a unique driving force for organics. Their growth rate at that time was around about up to 20% per annum, which is a really big growth. Again, both Holland, Denmark, and Sweden all have big import requirements for organic food. So during the winter time, they have to bring in food from the southern parts of Europe. So they're not like Australia, where we can almost get our food all year round. So there is a bit of planning involved, and it was good to see. Their truth in labelling is very important over there. Traceability, where the food comes from, and this is what we found in other parts of Europe as well, is that the consumer really wants to know it's not just good enough to be it's got the name of the brand and it's organic, but rather where did it come from. So that's what I got out of it. From Peak Body point of view, I think there was lots of ideas on how we can better help businesses. And that's part of the reason why we started the BO30 last year. And then we've had these business breakfasts, is that we seem to be getting good traction there. And we want to have these business breakfasts right around Australia. And as we build momentum, because we just find that these business breakfasts are just an opportunity for processors and farmers to get together and say, and it was an example in Sydney there, a processor was saying, look, I can't get hold of an apple producer. And then lo and behold, on his table opposite him was an apple producer. And it was like, then they started chatting. And at the end of the day, after we talked about different things, they all mulled around for an hour and a half. It was hard to, get them out of the room. They were just so happy to be there and talking. So I think that, as I said, that community sense and the sense of being part is, we see that all around the world in our travels. So, we then went from Sweden, and then we went down to Southeast Asia and had a look around there, Thailand, and I went into Cambodia and Laos, and I flipped over into Myanmar. We went to Vietnam, and you can see the subtropical farming techniques and how in the supermarkets there's such a big emphasis on trying to get clean food, and they just can't get it because their food producing system is under such stress, and that's where Australia's got such a big opportunity. After we feed ourselves, we've got a neighbour there that's just screaming out for this product. So when we got back home, as you can imagine, after seeing all these things, we sort of felt there's just such an opportunity for Australian organic businesses to go forward. Now, after Southeast Asia, then we went back into Europe again. We went over to Oslo in Norway, and then made our way down into Italy and spent 3 months in Italy, and that was probably the most extraordinary part of the trip. Just the local food culture, the really big emphasis on biodiversity, and they've actually got a separate certification system that's not even organic, that's about biodiversity, and I thought that was fantastic. It's protecting old varieties, protecting old breeds. They've got 400 different types of olive trees in the country. They've got 2 epicenters for vegetables, like where the vegetables actually originally came from. One in the Po Valley, one in Sicily. There was a farmer we met in central Sicily who had collected 35 of the 45 original wheat varieties that dated back 2,500 years. So you can imagine, when you go to these places and you see such passion and dedication to preserving history and the original genetics, it goes a lot further than a seed company. It's not so much about the money; it's about the protecting their heritage. So we went to a lemon farm, which you could, seriously, I've never had lemons like them. They're just intense, grown on beautiful, rich soils and attended to. And so I think each country has unique farmers and unique processing companies, but Italy has that culture of food and a passion for food, and they talk about food from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. So, and it was that little bit of, I suppose, that bit of passion that's driving us at the moment, is that we want to get into local food production, and we want to get into fresh, not just picking once a week, but picking more than once a week, so that the customer gets the stuff as we used to. I remember in one of the towns in Florence, when we were in the centre of Florence, and there was a little old lady every day. It didn't matter what, it could be raining or whatever. She was in her 90s, and she was selling her vegetables from her house, and obviously her place was outside of town there, and she'd be there every day. And so you make up a basic minestrone at home, and you just come in there and pick up a few little bits and pieces and take them back and make up your dish. I think that's what we need to build on here in this country, is more of that fresh, daily fresh if possible, and that's going to take time. At the moment, our definition of fresh is a little bit loose, but there's definitely research out there that indicates that within 7 to 10 days, 80% of the value of the vegetable is lost.
Is it true that vegetables that are high in minerals would dehydrate in the fridge rather than rot? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, of course. That's really what we call a 101 of gardening. So if you've got really good produce, and you pick it and you put it in the fridge and you compare it to, say, a basic supermarket line, the good produce should always dehydrate. It should never rot. So that's the key point for everybody. And sometimes you can have good conventional produce where they've attended to nutrition, but then you have the risk of other fungicides and pesticides being on the product. So for you as an organic consumer, the key thing is getting out there and looking at the produce and making sure that when you take it home, if it rots really quickly, it means they're not putting the adequate amount of nutrition on board.
What are your views on the future in terms of growing food and organic farming? Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, it's a really difficult question to answer, that one. I mean, if you look at the current carbon dioxide levels on the planet, which are now over 400 parts per million, there's a vast number of scientists that say that will be anywhere between a 3.5 and a 5 degrees increase in temperature. Now, for most of us, we don't even understand what that means, but I know here on our place, we're at 520 metres, and we're currently experiencing a 0.8 to 1% increase in temperature. That's what we're currently experiencing. On the ground here, that means you can get fluctuations exceeding 20 degrees Celsius in one day. So it might go really cold and then go really hot. And in some cases, it can be a lot more than that. Like in the middle of summer, we might have well into your 30s and 40s, and then drops down quite dramatically at night. And so from a producer's point of view, when the plant goes through that extremes in climatic change, it immediately thinks it's going to die and it starts to reproduce. So what we call it bolts. sets up a seed, and that reduces the quality of the vegetable. So unless we can get that CO2 level back down to the 300, 275 mark, it's going to be very problematic for the next generation, and that's your generation on. And that for me is concerning. And the only way we can reverse that is through carbon farming. And obviously we've got to move into renewables, and I'm hoping in the next couple of years that we'll be in a position to get batteries and to take ourselves off the grid. That's my goal. And I think it's the goal of many people in the cities. They're sick of this escalating electricity prices, and they want to form their own community grids. I think that's where it's going to go. Community grids and batteries, and taking our pressure off. Well, then that takes out your coal mines, which is important. And then now that we stop the coal mines, what do we then do with the existing CO2 in the air? Well, it has to go back into the soil. And to give you perspective on it, if we all did composting across all our agricultural land in the world, we could probably get the level back to around about 275 to 300 parts per million.
Wow.
And that work was done by Rodale Institute in the US, where they showed that year after year they could put up to 8 tonnes of CO2 per hectare back into the soil. And that's what we need to do. I mean, the issue of using coal-powered electricity is got to finish. And it was off the last election agenda, but I think it's got to be back right in the forefront of everyone's mind, is that how do we get away from that system? We don't need it, and it's not good for our future. On top of that, there's the amount of mercury they release. I mean, it's like, I think the US, the estimations of mercury from coal-powered power stations is about 40 tonne across the whole continent, across that whole landscape. And China, I think, is about 1,000 tonnes. So it's an extraordinary amount of mercury that's floating around the Northern Hemisphere. And we don't need that. It's just abhorrent. So do I feel optimistic? Yeah, I do. I do if we all start becoming more aware consumers. And I don't have much faith in politics, but I do have faith in the consumer, and the consumer will make their choice, and that's why they're buying organic. They want a future. They're saying, well, look, all right, it costs me a bit more, but, it's for a better planet. So bang, done deal.
If people want to support the Organic Federation of Australia, what should they do? Well,
look, our primary goal has always been to grow the industry, because by growing the industry, we grow communities, we grow biodiversity, we grow lots of things. And everybody benefits in that. Businesses benefit, the community benefits, consumers benefit. So, look, you can have a look at our website, Organic Federation of Australia. We do have lots of different membership. If you just want to be a basic members, we've got from students all the way through to businesses. And it's an annual membership. It's online. And we have a number of newsletters every year. And we keep you up to date with all the latest stuff relating to the organic industry. So it's like your service. It's just about helping each other to build.
Have you got any meetings or events coming up?
Oh, I think the big one is going to be the launch of the national mark in November. That's we've got it scheduled for the 30th of November. So that's going to be it's going to be a cracker, actually. It's 400 seats. It'll be in the Great Hall, Parliament House, which is a beautiful it's not old, it's quite new, extraordinary place. And that'll be a great networking event, I think. It's going to be really quite unique. And then, as I said, probably around March, I haven't set a date yet, but around March we'll have a local food production sort of a luncheon in Brisbane. So we're going to have another a business luncheon, and that'll be a great event too.
How about social media? Are you on Facebook or Twitter?
Yes, we have Twitter and Facebook, and just contact us. We have both memberships and supporters. So if you'd like to come on board, we'd love to see you there.
If you enjoyed this interview and would like to hear more in the future, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel Guide to Organics. And of course, I'll tell you about any new content in my newsletter, which you can sign up to from the website guidetoorganics.com.au. Also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest and Google Plus as Guide to Organics.